She died protecting everyone. They forgot one thing. The first scream wasn't hers. It belonged to someone behind her. By the time they realized who had locked the emergency gates, it was already too late. A pair of emerald eyes slowly opened. Liora blinked once, then twice. Warm sunlight spilled through cream-colored curtains embroidered with tiny lavender flowers. The scent of fresh pastries drifted through the open balcony doors as pastel butterflies fluttered over blooming window boxes. Her heart pounded. No freezing wind. No collapsing shelter. No blood. She raised her trembling paws. Soft black fur. Long, silky strands brushed against her wrists exactly as they always had. She was alive. She stumbled from her bed and stared into the oval mirror hanging beside her wardrobe. A beautiful young cat stood staring back. Tall, graceful, long-haired, emerald eyes, a silver ribbon, still tied around one ear from yesterday's charity gala. Yesterday, Liora's breathing stopped. No! She rushed toward the calendar hanging beside the door. 32 days. 32 days before Ashfall. Her knees nearly gave way. She remembered everything. Every desperate face. Every empty promise. Every betrayal. Every door that had slammed shut. Ashfall hadn't been a war. It hadn't been an earthquake. No scientist had predicted it correctly. Without warning, enormous crystal storms began falling from the clouds. Anything they touched became encased in strange glass-like ice that never melted. Cities disappeared. Harvests failed. Machines stopped. Power vanished. Within weeks, entire kingdoms collapsed into panic. Food became worth more than gold. Kindness became rarer than sunlight. And trust. Trust became the deadliest mistake anyone could make. Liora knew. Because she'd made it. She had inherited Moonbell Sanctuary, the largest emergency reserve ever built beneath the Silver Hills. Food. Medicine. Clean water. Generators. Seeds. Everything needed to survive years underground. She had spent her fortune preparing because no one believed her research. When the first crystal storm arrived, everyone suddenly believed. Neighbors begged. Friends cried. Business rivals apologized. Family embraced her. She opened the gates. She welcomed every one of them. She believed compassion would save them all. Instead, they waited. Waited until she became exhausted. Waited until she trusted them. Waited until she handed over every security code herself. Then they smiled. One by one. They locked her outside. She could still hear the final words. You've always been useful, Liora. Useful. Not loved. Not respected. Useful. She closed her eyes. This lifetime, no one would mistake her kindness for weakness. A gentle knock echoed across the room. My lady. Her elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Bramble, carefully opened the door. You slept much longer than usual. Liora froze. Mrs. Bramble. Alive. The old calico cat had been the very first casualty during Ashfall after refusing to abandon the orphan kittens under her care. Liora crossed the room in 3 quick steps. Before the older cat could react, Liora wrapped both arms around her. Mrs. Bramble blinked. My stars. You're hugging me. Liora laughed. Then cried. Then laughed again. Mrs. Bramble gently patted her shoulder. I know today's meeting with the council is stressful, dear, but I promise it cannot be that bad. Liora smiled through watery eyes. If only you knew. She silently made her first promise. Mrs. Bramble would survive. No matter what. Not everyone deserved a second chance. But she did. Minutes later, Liora stood on the highest balcony overlooking Belhaven. The city looked peaceful. Rows of pastel cottages lined winding cobblestone streets. Pink flowering trees swayed gently in the breeze. Colorful cafes filled with laughing families. Artists painted beside sparkling fountains. Children chased floating paper lanterns. It looked like paradise. She remembered what it would become. Silent. Frozen. Empty. A knock sounded behind her. A cheerful orange tabby hurried onto the balcony, carrying a bouquet. Liora! Rowan. Her fiancé. He smiled exactly as he had in her first life. Perfect posture. Perfect manners. Perfect voice. Perfect lies. He handed her the flowers. For my future wife. She accepted them, smiled warmly, then placed them on the balcony railing without looking. His ears twitched. Usually she admired every bouquet. Today, nothing. You seem different. Do I? You've barely looked at me. Liora stepped closer until they stood face to face. In her previous life, she would have kissed him. Today, she searched his eyes instead. Nothing. No guilt. No shame. Only calculation hidden behind charm. He reached for her paw. She smoothly stepped aside. I have work. He frowned. Since when do you skip breakfast with me? Since today. For the first time, she watched uncertainty flicker across his face. Good. Confused enemies made mistakes. Comfortable enemies were dangerous. As Rowan left, Liora walked directly toward her private office. She ignored invitations. Ignored messages. Ignored every smiling face in the hallway. Instead, she unlocked a dusty cabinet no one else knew existed. Inside rested dozens of research journals, weather models, geological reports, supply calculations. Every warning everyone had mocked. She spread them across the desk. 32 days. This time, she wouldn't spend them begging anyone to listen. She dipped a fountain pen into ink. Across the first page, she wrote only 4 words. Save the worthy first. Then she turned to a fresh page. Below it, she began writing names. Liora stared at the growing list of names. She didn't write enemies first. She wrote heroes. Mrs. Bramble. Captain Alder, Professor Hazel, Dr. Sorrel, Engineer Finch, Farmer Willow, every cat who had quietly sacrificed everything during Ashfall without asking for recognition. In her previous life, they had died because she found them too late. This time, she would find them first. Only after writing every worthy soul did she begin another page. Rowan, Celeste, Mayor Hawthorne, Director Quill, Milo. Each name carried a memory sharper than broken glass. None of them had killed her with their own paws. They simply watched. Sometimes silence was the cruelest betrayal. Liora closed the notebook. Revenge could wait. Preparation could not. She pressed a hidden brass button beneath her desk. The bookshelf slid aside with a quiet rumble. Behind it waited a circular elevator that descended deep beneath the manor. Only 3 living cats knew it existed, and one of them had betrayed her. The elevator doors opened into an underground command room. Hundreds of glowing crystal screens surrounded a giant holographic map of Belhaven. Dust coated everything. No one had entered for years. Liora walked slowly through the chamber. Every step awakened another light. One by one, ancient systems hummed back to life. The city map shimmered above the center table. Storage tunnels, emergency wells, escape routes, hidden train lines. Everything her grandmother had secretly built decades earlier after surviving another forgotten catastrophe. Everyone believed the Moonbell estate was simply an elegant mansion. Nobody knew an entire underground city slept beneath it. She smiled. Good. The fewer who knew, the longer everyone inside would survive. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Primary air recognized. Liora stopped. I wasn't expecting you to activate yet. The gentle voice answered again. Welcome home, Lady Liora. She remembered this. In her previous life, she hadn't discovered the estate's true operating system until weeks after Ashfall began. By then, most of its infrastructure had already been destroyed. This time, she had 32 days. The glowing map expanded. Hundreds of sealed rooms appeared. Greenhouses, water reservoirs, medical wings, dormitories, workshops, libraries, even underground orchards waiting to be restored. The sanctuary wasn't just a bunker. It had been designed to become an entire hidden town. Liora whispered one command. Status. The room answered immediately. Structural integrity, 82%. Food reserves, 4 months. Water reserves, 27 months. Power generation, 21% operational. She frowned. Not enough. Not even close. The sanctuary had once housed nearly 4,000 cats. Now, it could barely support 300. She began issuing orders. Wake every maintenance drone. Tiny clockwork robots emerged from hidden wall compartments. Some no larger than mice. Others the size of wolves. Each painted in soft pastel blues, mint greens and warm creams. Their crystal eyes glowed. Welcome back, Lady Liora. She couldn't help smiling. I've missed you too. The little machine scattered in every direction. Within seconds, dust vanished. Lights brightened. Broken pipes sealed themselves. Gardens began receiving water again. For the first time in years, Moonbell's sanctuary breathed. Across town, Rowan wasn't smiling anymore. He sat inside the luxurious Velvet Clover Cafe with 2 familiar faces. Celeste, a graceful white Persian known throughout Belhaven for her flawless manners, and Mayor Hawthorne, a broad-shouldered tabby whose speeches had earned countless elections. Rowan stirred his tea. Liora knows something. Celeste raised an eyebrow. That's impossible. She refused breakfast. Mayor Hawthorne laughed. That's your evidence? No. Rowan leaned forward. She looked at me. Celeste frowned. What does that mean? She wasn't looking at her fiancé. He lowered his voice. She was studying me. The table fell quiet. Mayor Hawthorne chuckled. You're imagining things. I hope I am. Celeste folded her paws. Regardless, the council votes next month. Liora controls the Moonbell Trust. Without her signature, none of us gain access to the emergency reserves. Mayor Hawthorne smiled. Then make sure she signs. I always do. Rowan answered. But for the first time, he sounded uncertain. Back beneath the manor, Liora examined supply records. Every number made her stomach tighten. Entire warehouses had been emptied years before for charity drives. Medical supplies had expired. Generators needed rebuilding. The underground farms required fresh soil. There wasn't enough time. Unless, she looked toward the old freight elevator. It connected directly to abandoned railway tunnels stretching beneath Belhaven. No one used them anymore. Everyone believed they had collapsed decades ago. Perfect. Quiet transportation. Invisible deliveries. She immediately called the city's largest construction company. A cheerful receptionist answered. Good afternoon. I'd like to hire every excavation crew you have available. Silence. I'm sorry. Every crew. Every one. For how long? 30 days. The receptionist nervously laughed. Lady Liora, that's enough work to renovate half the kingdom. I know. Money could be replaced. Time couldn't. Within an hour, dozens of contracts were signed. By sunset, heavy machinery quietly entered the abandoned railway network under strict confidentiality agreements. Workers assumed they were restoring historical tunnels. None realized they were rebuilding humanity's future. That evening, Mrs. Bramble carried tea into the library. She paused. Liora. The young cat looked up from a mountain of blueprints. Yes. You've been working for 16 hours. I'm almost finished. You said that 4 hours ago. Liora smiled sheepishly. Mrs. Bramble gently placed a plate of warm cinnamon pastries beside her. You cannot save anyone if you collapse first. Liora stared at the pastries. In her previous life, Mrs. Bramble had baked these every Friday. During Ashfall, the old housekeeper quietly gave every pastry to hungry kittens. She never ate one herself. Liora swallowed the lump in her throat. This time, Mrs. Bramble would never know hunger. Never again. She picked up one pastry, took a bite, closed her eyes. It tasted like home. Mrs. Bramble smiled. There she is. My little workaholic. Liora laughed. I've missed hearing that. Mrs. Bramble looked confused. I only called you that yesterday. Liora looked toward the window where the sunset painted the sky in pastel pinks and soft lavender. It feels much longer. Outside, the peaceful city continued laughing beneath warm summer skies. Street musicians played cheerful melodies. Markets bustled with customers. Children chased glowing balloons through flower-lined streets. Nobody noticed the tiny crystal snowflake drifting silently from a perfectly blue sky. It landed on a rooftop, didn't melt, and quietly spread across the tiles like delicate glass. Liora saw it. Her smile disappeared. They're early. The countdown had already begun. The crystal spread no farther. It simply rested there. Beautiful. Silent. Impossible. Anyone else would have called it a trick of the light. Liora knew better. The first crystal always appeared alone, like a whisper before a scream. She rushed back into the command chamber beneath the manor. Scanned atmospheric conditions. The sanctuary's soft mechanical voice answered immediately. Unidentified crystalline particles detected. Her ears flattened. Probability of accelerated ashfall. The glowing map flickered. Previous projections, no longer reliable. Estimated arrival advanced by 4 days. Liora closed her eyes. 4 days. That sounded small. It wasn't. 4 days meant thousands of lives that would never have time to prepare. 4 days meant shipments arriving too late. 4 days meant farms unfinished. Power stations incomplete. Medical wings only half-stocked. For the first time since awakening, she felt fear. Not for herself. For everyone she still hadn't reached. No. Fear solved nothing. She opened her eyes. Revised every construction schedule. Prioritized water. Food. Medical facilities. Everything decorative moves to the bottom. Confirmed. The sanctuary immediately rerouted hundreds of work orders. Walls that had been scheduled for polishing became emergency insulation projects. Luxury guest suites became hospital wards. Underground fountains became water purification systems. Everything shifted. Everything became survival. The following morning, Belhaven awoke to sunshine. News reporters laughed about an unusual weather phenomenon. It's probably pollen. One meteorologist joked while pointing toward tiny glittering particles drifting through the air. The audience laughed with him. Liora switched off the television. She remembered. In her first life, they laughed until rivers became crystal. Outside the Moonbell estate, construction vehicles lined the streets. Engineers hurried through the gates carrying blueprints. Electricians, garden specialists, hydrologists, geologists. Everyone believed Lady Liora was beginning an extravagant renovation. The local newspapers loved it. Young heiress begins most expensive home makeover in history. Perfect. Curious reporters looked for luxury, not survival. Exactly as she intended. Deep below ground, Captain Alder stepped from the freight elevator. He was a broad-shouldered Maine Coon with faded scars across one cheek and calm amber eyes that missed nothing. In her previous life, he had defended frightened civilians until his final breath, using nothing more than a rescue axe. No medals, no monuments, only courage. He removed his cap politely. You requested my services, Lady Liora. I did. I've retired. I know. I don't train private security anymore. I know. I've refused every offer for 5 years. I know. Captain Alder blinked. You seem unusually informed. Liora smiled. I do my homework. He looked around the enormous underground station. What exactly am I protecting? She considered answering honestly. Instead, the future. He stared for several long seconds. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. I've accepted stranger contracts. Liora laughed. So have I. She handed him a thick folder. Inside were detailed plans, security sectors, evacuation routes, communication protocols, emergency drills. Captain Alder turned page after page. His expression slowly changed. By the final page, the amusement had vanished. This isn't security planning. No. This is disaster preparation. Yes. You actually expect civilization to collapse. I do. He closed the folder carefully. Everyone else would think you've lost your mind. And you. I think. He looked around the cavernous sanctuary. You're either the greatest fool I've ever met, or the only sensible cat left. So, he extended one large paw. When do I begin? Liora shook it. Immediately. Elsewhere, Rowan stood outside Moonbell Estate watching truck after truck disappear behind the gates. His smile grew thinner. They're bringing in industrial generators now. Celeste folded her arms. That's the 5th convoy today. Mayor Hawthorne narrowed his eyes. What exactly is she building? One of Rowan's assistants hurried over carrying photographs. Sir, they're also purchasing medical equipment, and grain, and water tanks, and enough solar panels to power a district. Mayor Hawthorne frowned. That isn't a renovation. No, Celeste whispered. It's preparation. Rowan immediately dismissed the idea. For what? Winter. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. None of them imagined the truth. That evening, Liora personally visited Professor Hazel. The elderly tortoiseshell lived alone inside a tiny cottage overflowing with books and flowering vines. She opened the door, carrying flour on her nose. Oh, Lady Liora. I wasn't expecting visitors. You've been baking. Professor Hazel laughed. I always bake when solving difficult equations. Liora smiled. Some things never changed. She accepted the invitation inside. Fresh lavender biscuits cooled beside the window. Astronomy charts covered every wall. The professor poured tea. So, what impossible favor brings Belhaven's richest young lady to my humble home? Liora didn't waste time. I need every climate model you've ever created. Professor Hazel nearly dropped her teacup. My climate research? Yes. Nobody has cared about that in years. I care. The old scholar tilted her head. Why? Liora looked toward the evening sky. Because I believe your calculations were right. Silence filled the room. Professor Hazel slowly walked toward an old cabinet. With trembling paws, she unlocked its lowest drawer. Inside rested dozens of journals. Rejected research. Mocked theories. Years of work dismissed by the scientific council. She gently lifted one notebook. I always wondered if someone would finally listen. Liora accepted the notebook with both paws. I should have listened sooner. Professor Hazel looked puzzled. But we've never met before. Liora smiled softly. It feels like I've known your work forever. The old professor chuckled. Well, I've always wanted one brilliant student. Perhaps today is my lucky day. Leora's eyes became suspiciously shiny. No, not lucky. Necessary. Because in 30 days, Professor Hazel's forgotten research would become the foundation of every decision inside Moonbell Sanctuary. Late that night, the sanctuary's alarm chimed. A soft blue warning spread across every display. Unauthorized access detected. Captain Alder immediately reached for his communicator. Location. The map zoomed toward the abandoned railway tunnels. One tiny blinking to move slowly through the darkness. Not a worker. Not maintenance. Someone else. Liora studied the monitor. The figure paused, then carefully photographed one of the newly reinforced tunnel entrances. Captain Alder's expression hardened. Industrial spy. Maybe. Liora zoomed in further. The image sharpened. The stranger lowered their hood for only a moment. Golden eyes. Cream-colored fur. A familiar face. Rowan's personal assistant. Liora quietly folded her arms. So, they've started investigating already. Captain Alder looked toward her. Should I have my team remove the intruder? Liora watched the spy disappear deeper into the tunnel. Then, a slow smile appeared. No. Captain Alder looked surprised. We'll let them find exactly what I want them to see. Far above them, another crystal snowflake drifted silently from the stars. Then another. Then another. Belhaven remained asleep. No one looked up, except Liora. And this time, she refused to blink first. The spy never realized she had been discovered. She moved carefully through the abandoned railway tunnel, photographing reinforced doors, electrical cables, and stacks of construction materials. Exactly as Liora had hoped. Nothing she saw mattered. Everything important lay, hidden, several levels below. Captain Alder folded his arms. She'll report everything. Liora nodded. I know. You're comfortable with that? I'd rather my enemies believe they're winning. He studied her quietly. You've done this before. For the briefest moment. Liora looked away. Something like that. An hour later, Rowan sat inside his private study. His assistant spread dozens of photographs across the desk. She's definitely building something underground. Rowan examined each picture. Steel supports, water tanks, electrical conduits, emergency exits. Nothing unusual. Nothing extraordinary. Mayor Hawthorne leaned back in his chair. So. Rowan tapped one photograph thoughtfully. She's building an underground luxury estate. Celeste looked relieved. I knew it. Mayor Hawthorne laughed. That explains everything. She's always loved oversized projects. None of them noticed what wasn't in the photographs. No food storage. No hidden chambers. No command center. No underground farms. Liora had carefully guided the spy through the oldest section of the tunnel network. Everything modern remained invisible. Exactly as planned. The following morning, Moonbell Sanctuary became louder than ever. Clockwork maintenance, drones zipped through hallways carrying tiny bricks. Engineers welded reinforced doors. Gardeners transformed underground chambers into enormous indoor orchards. Fresh herbs filled the air with calming scents. Mint, rosemary, lavender. Tiny waterfalls flowed into newly restored reservoirs. Every corridor slowly changed from forgotten stone into a warm underground village. Workers smiled despite the exhausting pace. Lady Liora visited each team personally. She remembered every name, thanked every worker, ate lunch beside electricians, shared tea with gardeners, helped carry supplies when no one expected it. Captain Alder watched from a distance. One of his guards smiled. I've never worked for someone like her. Captain Alder nodded. Neither have I. She treats everyone the same. He watched Liora helping an elderly plumber tighten a stubborn valve. That's why they'll work twice as hard. Respect couldn't be purchased. It had to be earned. Liora understood that. That afternoon, Professor Hazel rushed into the command chamber, carrying 5 overflowing notebooks. I found it. Liora immediately stood. The atmospheric equations. The professor nodded excitedly. Not just that. She spread maps across the table. Ocean currents, jet streams, crystal particle simulations, temperature collapse models. Then she pointed toward one alarming chart. The storms aren't random. Liora leaned closer. They're migrating. Professor Hazel nodded. Following underground crystal veins beneath the continent. Captain Alder frowned. So, some places will be hit harder than others. Much harder. The professor tapped a glowing red circle on the map. Bellhaven. Leora's heartbeat slowed. Of course. That explained everything. Ashfall hadn't simply chosen Bellhaven. The city had unknowingly been built above the largest crystal fault in the kingdom, which meant the first major catastrophe would begin here. Professor Hazel looked worried. If my calculations are right, the first crystal storm will arrive in 20 days. Liora quietly slid another report beside it. I believe it'll arrive in 24. The professor's eyes widened. You think it's accelerating? I know it is. Captain Alder looked between them. Then we're running out of time. Liora nodded. Triple every delivery. Double every work shift. No unnecessary meetings. No ceremonies. No celebrations. Every hour matters. Everyone immediately scattered. No one argued. Across Bellhaven, preparations of another kind had begun. Mayor Hawthorne stood proudly before cheering citizens. Colorful banners fluttered overhead. Musicians played joyful tunes. The Summer Bloom Festival will be the greatest celebration in Bellhaven's history. The crowd erupted into applause. Food stalls lined every street. Fireworks were ordered. Decorations filled the city squares. Hotels sold out. Merchants celebrated record business. Everyone prepared for a festival. No one prepared for survival. Liora watched the announcement from a small television in the sanctuary cafeteria. Mrs. Bramble sighed. They all look so happy. They are. They don't deserve what's coming. Liora quietly answered. No, they don't. Mrs. Bramble gently squeezed her paw. You're carrying something very heavy. Liora forced a smile. I'm managing. The older cat wasn't convinced. But she said nothing more. Sometimes, kindness meant sitting beside someone without asking impossible questions. Late that night, Liora couldn't sleep. She wandered alone through the sanctuary gardens. Artificial sunlight dimmed into soft moonlight. Pastel flowers swayed beneath gentle ventilation currents. Tiny birds, carefully bred for underground habitats, chirped softly among flowering trees. It almost felt like the world outside didn't exist. Then, she heard crying. Very quietly, she followed the sound. Behind a half-finished greenhouse sat a tiny kitten, no older than 7, cream-colored, wearing oversized goggles, trying desperately to fix a broken maintenance drone. The little drone gave one sad beep, then fell silent. The kitten sighed dramatically. I knew I should have tightened that spring. Liora smiled despite herself. Need some help? The kitten jumped nearly a meter into the air. Oh, I didn't hear you. Liora crouched beside the tiny robot. You built this. The kitten proudly nodded. Mostly. It keeps exploding. I've almost solved that part. Liora laughed. What's your name? Pip. And yours? Liora. The kitten's eyes grew enormous. Wait. The Lady Liora. The one paying everyone. The one with the giant underground castle. Liora chuckled. It's more of a very large basement. Pip looked around dramatically. This basement has waterfalls. Fair point. The kitten scratched behind one ear. I wasn't supposed to come. My aunt works here. She couldn't find anyone to watch me, so I promised to stay out of trouble. Liora looked at the broken drone. How's that promise going? Pip smiled sheepishly. 50-50. Liora carefully picked up the tiny machine. She immediately noticed the repair wasn't bad. In fact, it was surprisingly clever. You designed this gear? Pip nodded. It spins better that way. Liora examined the mechanism again. The child had quietly improved the original design. Without formal training. Without expensive tools. Just curiosity. A memory surfaced. During Ashfall, a young inventor had created compact water filters that saved hundreds of lives. She never learned the inventor's name. Could it have been? Pip, would you like to help my engineers after school? The kitten froze. Really? I can. If your aunt agrees. Pip hugged the little drone. This is the greatest day ever. Liora smiled warmly. Sometimes, saving the future didn't begin with armies. Sometimes, it began by believing in one small kitten before anyone else did. As she walked away, Captain Alder approached from the shadows. You recruit children now. Liora laughed. I recruit talent. He looked toward the excited little inventor. I have a feeling. You just found someone important. Liora watched Pip happily repairing the tiny drone. So do I. Neither of them noticed the sanctuary's central computer quietly processing new data. A soft chime echoed through the command center. Exceptional individual detected. Potential contribution to long-term survival, extremely high. Then the message disappeared before anyone could read it. Somewhere far beyond Bellhaven, dark clouds slowly gathered over the distant mountains. And this time, they carried no rain. The clouds arrived before dawn. Not ordinary clouds. These drifted unnaturally low, rolling silently across the hills like pale silver waves. The sunrise never came. Instead, the entire sky glowed with a strange lavender light. Bellhaven woke beneath a ceiling of shimmering crystal mist. Most citizens stopped to admire it. Children pointed excitedly. Artists hurried outside with paintbrushes. Photographers filled the town square. It's beautiful. Someone shouted. Liora stood on the highest observation balcony of Moonbell's sanctuary. Her expression never changed. It started sooner. Captain Alder joined her, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. You were right. I wish I wasn't. Tiny glittering flakes floated lazily through the air. Unlike snow, they never melted. Whenever one landed, it quietly dissolved into sparkling dust. Harmless. For now. Captain Alder looked uneasy. If these are harmless, why are you worried? Liora picked up a crystal flake before it vanished. It isn't the flakes. It's what follows. Inside the sanctuary, construction had entered its final stage. Hundreds of workers moved through brightly lit corridors. Warm pastel walls replaced cold concrete. Soft lanterns glowed along every hallway. Dormitories, filled with handcrafted wooden furniture. Children's rooms were painted in gentle mint greens, soft peaches, pale blues, and lavender. Mrs. Bramble insisted every room should feel like a home, not a bunker. Liora agreed. If frightened families eventually arrived, the first thing they needed wasn't luxury. It was hope. Engineer Finch hurried toward the command center, carrying several reports. A slim gray cat with round glasses and permanently messy fur, Finch had become famous for solving impossible engineering problems. He placed the documents onto the table. The geothermal generators are online. Captain Alder smiled. Finally, Finch adjusted his glasses. We're now producing enough electricity to power the sanctuary indefinitely. Liora exhaled slowly. Excellent. But, Finch hesitated. There is one problem. The western water pumps are wearing out much faster than expected. Can they be repaired? Yes. But replacement parts will take at least 12 days. Liora quietly studied the map. 12 days. They didn't have 12 days. She immediately reached for the communication console. Contact every machine shop within 3 provinces. We're manufacturing the parts ourselves. Finch blinked. That's expensive. So is running out of water. Captain Alder couldn't help smiling. Every solution from Liora followed the same rule. Never gamble with survival. Never assume tomorrow would arrive. Meanwhile, across Bellhaven, Rowan walked confidently through the city's largest financial district. Business owners greeted him warmly. Investors shook his paw. Everyone believed he would soon become Bellhaven's most influential businessman after marrying Liora. Only, the wedding invitations had quietly stopped. The expensive venue had never been rebooked. Liora hadn't answered his messages for nearly a week. His confidence was beginning to crack. He entered a luxurious restaurant where Celeste and Mayor Hawthorne already waited. Celeste noticed immediately. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping. Mayor Hawthorne laughed. Wedding nerves. No. Rowan lowered his voice. I had someone investigate Moonbell Estate. What did they find? They disappeared. Silence. Celeste frowned. What do you mean, disappeared? The investigation team entered the old railway tunnels. They never reported back. Mayor Hawthorne rolled his eyes. They probably quit. Without collecting payment. The mayor hesitated. No. Rowan stared through the restaurant window. I think Liora is hiding something. Celeste folded her paws. Then perhaps it's time we stop watching. And start acting. Later that afternoon, Liora visited the underground school being prepared for future children. Tiny pastel desks lined the classrooms. Books filled the shelves. Large windows displayed beautiful artificial gardens instead of blank concrete walls. Professor Hazel smiled. You even plan classrooms. Liora gently ran a paw across one of the desks. Children deserve to keep learning, even if the world outside ends. Professor Hazel looked around the empty room. What made you think of all this? Liora remembered frightened kittens sitting in freezing darkness during her previous life, trying to remember songs, so they wouldn't remember hunger. She quietly answered, because survival isn't enough. We have to keep living. Professor Hazel smiled proudly. That's the wisest thing I've heard all year. As evening settled, Pip raced through the corridors, carrying a tiny mechanical bird. It works! It actually works! The little invention flapped pastel-colored wings before landing neatly on Leora's shoulder. Captain Alder laughed. I thought that thing exploded yesterday. It exploded 3 times. Pip corrected proudly. But now it only explodes a little. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Liora. The mechanical bird chirped happily before projecting a tiny glowing map onto the wall. Engineer Finch's eyes widened. You built a portable surveying drone. Pip scratched behind one ear. Maybe. Finch looked at Liora. This kitten is frighteningly talented. Liora smiled. I noticed. She knelt beside Pip. How would you like your own workshop? The kitten's mouth fell open. My own workshop. A real one. With proper tools. And safety goggles that actually fit. Pip tackled Liora in the biggest hug tiny arms could manage. Captain Alder chuckled. I think that's a yes. Hours later, the sanctuary's atmosphere suddenly shifted. Emergency lights glowed softly amber. Not an alarm. A notification. The Central Intelligence spoke calmly. Incoming visitor. Liora frowned. No deliveries are scheduled. Captain Alder immediately reached for his communicator. Outer gate team. Report. Static answered. Then, a nervous guard replied. Captain, you should come see this. Moments later, Liora arrived at the enormous entrance gate. Beyond the reinforced steel doors stood an elderly traveling monk. His robe was faded sky blue. His walking staff was carved from pale white wood. A small woven basket rested beside him. He wasn't frightened. He wasn't demanding entry. He simply stood quietly beneath the strange crystal sky. Captain Alder whispered, Our sensors never detected him approaching. Liora stepped toward the intercom. Can I help you? The old monk smiled gently. I've been looking for the keeper. Leora's heartbeat skipped. No one knows that title. I do. He bowed respectfully. You remembered. Liora frowned. I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. The monk chuckled softly. No. I rarely make that mistake. He looked directly into her emerald eyes. Especially not twice. The world seemed to stop. Captain Alder looked between them in confusion. Liora had never seen this cat before. She was certain. Yet, something about his voice felt impossibly familiar. As if she had heard it, long after the world had frozen. The monk gently placed his basket on the ground. Inside, rested a single crystal flower. It wasn't frozen. It wasn't dead. It was blooming. Under impossible conditions. Leora's eyes widened. No, she whispered. That can't exist. The monk smiled kindly. It couldn't. In your first life. Then he said 6 words that made every memory inside Leora's mind come crashing back. You are not the only one who was given another chance. The wind outside suddenly howled. Above Belhaven, the silver clouds darkened. And for the first time, thunder echoed from a sky that contained no storm. Silence swallowed the entrance hall. Even the humming generators seemed quieter. Captain Alder instinctively stepped in front of Liora. Lady Liora, stay behind me. The elderly monk raised both paws with a gentle smile. I didn't come to fight. If I had, I certainly wouldn't announce myself. Captain Alder didn't lower his guard. I've met peaceful-looking cats before. They're usually the dangerous ones. The monk chuckled. A sensible captain. I approve. Liora couldn't take her eyes off the crystal flower resting inside the woven basket. She had searched for years in her previous life. Every scientist, every explorer, every ancient manuscript. Nothing had ever mentioned a flower surviving ashfall. Yet here it was, blooming peacefully. Its delicate petals shimmered in soft pastel shades of lavender, blush pink, and pale blue. Almost as if the crystal itself had learned to nurture life instead of destroy it. Liora slowly asked, Who are you? The old monk bowed. My name is Brother Rowan. Captain Alder immediately looked confused. Liora blinked. The name meant nothing. Good. For one terrifying second, she had feared another coincidence. Brother Rowan smiled knowingly. I can see you're disappointed. I was hoping you'd recognize me. I don't. No. You wouldn't. Not yet. Liora folded her arms. You said I'm not the only one given another chance. I did. Were you reborn too? The monk tilted his head. Not exactly. Then explain. Instead of answering, he gently picked up the crystal flower. The petals glowed brighter. Tiny floating lights drifted into the air. One by one, images appeared. A frozen city, collapsed towers, families huddled together beneath shattered bridges. The pictures floated like living memories. Captain Alder stared in disbelief. What is this? Memory. The monk answered quietly. Liora stepped closer. One image made her breath catch. She recognized herself. Older. Tired. Standing atop Moonbell's sanctuary during the final days of Ashfall. She looked stronger than Liora remembered. More determined. Less afraid. Then, the memory continued beyond her own death. Liora froze. She had never seen this. After she was locked outside. After the sanctuary doors closed. After the crystal storm consumed her. The image should have ended. Instead, the crystal flowers showed something impossible. Moonbell's sanctuary survived. For another 7 years. Captain Alder survived. Professor Hazel survived. Mrs. Bramble survived. Pip, older now, wearing an engineer's coat, running through the sanctuary repairing life support systems. Leora's eyes filled with tears. They lived. The monk nodded. They did. I thought everyone. You weren't there to see the rest. The images shifted again. 7 years passed in moments. Food slowly disappeared. Machines began failing. Entire sections of the sanctuary became abandoned. Hope faded. One winter, the final generator died. Darkness swallowed everything. Captain Alder was the last guardian standing. Professor Hazel passed away, peacefully, while writing in her journal. Mrs. Bramble comforted frightened children until her final breath. Pip, now an adult, refused to abandon the remaining survivors. The young inventor worked without sleep for 12 straight days trying to restart the generators. On the 13th day, the lights finally returned. Only, there was nobody left alive to see them. Liora covered her mouth. No. The monk quietly lowered the flower. Your sacrifice bought them 7 more years. But not forever. Captain Alder stood frozen. So, those were our futures. They were. And now. The monk looked toward Liora. Everything has changed. Inside the command chamber, the sanctuary's senior team gathered around the enormous holographic map. Captain Alder, Professor Hazel, Engineer Finch, Mrs. Bramble, even little Pip insisted on attending. I'll be quiet, the kitten promised. I just want to learn. Nobody had the heart to say no. Brother Rowan calmly sat beside the glowing table. He looked completely at home. Liora spoke first. You said you weren't reborn. What are you? The monk smiled. I was the keeper before you. Every eye in the room widened. The keeper, Professor Hazel whispered. Brother Rowan nodded. For generations, certain families watched the crystal. They studied it, prepared for it, and occasionally, they survived it. Engineer Finch frowned. You mean Ashfall happened before? Many times. The room became deathly silent. Brother Rowan reached into his robe. He carefully unfolded an ancient parchment. The edges had become fragile with age. The ink had faded, yet one illustration remained perfectly clear. A painting of Belhaven, frozen beneath silver crystal. Exactly as Liora remembered. Except, the date beneath it was impossible. 312 years ago. Captain Alder stared at the parchment. That's impossible. So was surviving death. The monk replied gently. No one argued. He wasn't wrong. Liora leaned forward. If Ashfall keeps returning, why doesn't history remember? Brother Rowan sighed. Because history dies. When kingdoms fall, libraries burn, records disappear, survivors tell stories, the next generation calls them myths. Professor Hazel slowly sat down. My research. I kept finding references to recurring crystal winters. I assumed they were legends. They weren't. No, the monk answered. They were warnings. Pip quietly raised one tiny paw. Everyone turned toward the kitten. Can I ask something? Brother Rowan smiled warmly. Of course. If everyone forgets, how did you remember? The old monk looked thoughtfully at the crystal flower. Because someone remembered for me. He gently touched one glowing petal. My grandmother. Before she died, she gave me this flower. And one instruction. He smiled sadly. When the keeper returns, find her. He looked directly at Liora. It took 27 years. But I found you. Liora felt an unexpected weight settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just survival anymore. She had inherited something ancient. Something far older than Moonbell's sanctuary. Far older than Belhaven. Perhaps. Far older than any kingdom. A sharp alarm suddenly interrupted the meeting. Red lights flashed. The sanctuary's voice echoed urgently. Emergency. Emergency. Unidentified crystalline growth detected. The holographic map zoomed toward Belhaven. Everyone watched in horror. Small crystal formations had begun appearing across the city. On rooftops, bridges, lampposts, trees. At first glance, they looked almost decorative. Beautiful. Sparkling. Harmless. Then one of the markers blinked. It doubled in size. 5 seconds later, it doubled again. Engineer Finch whispered. That's impossible. Professor Hazel frantically checked her calculations. The growth rate is increasing. Captain Alder immediately grabbed his communicator. Security teams. Prepare for emergency deployment. Liora never looked away from the map. No. Captain Alder turned. If those crystals spread, they're bait. What? Brother Rowan quietly nodded. She's correct. Captain Alder frowned. Bait for what? Almost as if answering him. Every light inside the sanctuary flickered. Once. Twice. Then. The central computer displayed a message it had never shown before. External life form detected. The room fell silent. Pip blinked. External. Engineer Finch slowly swallowed. As in. Outside. The computer chimed again. Unknown entity approaching Belhaven. Distance remaining. 27 kilometers. No image appeared. No description. Only a single moving signal. Slowly. Deliberately. Walking toward the city. Brother Rowan quietly closed his eyes. I prayed. We'd have more time. Liora stared at the approaching marker. In her previous life, there had only been the crystal. No monsters. No mysterious traveler. No ancient keeper. The future had already changed. Which meant, everything she thought she knew could no longer be trusted. The glowing marker stopped. Exactly 27 kilometers from Belhaven. No closer. No farther. Every cat inside the command chamber held their breath. Captain Alder broke the silence. Can the sensors identify it? The sanctuary answered immediately. Negative. Life form does not match any known biological records. Engineer Finch frowned. Maybe the scanners are malfunctioning. Brother Rowan slowly shook his head. No. They've never been wrong. Pip nervously looked around. So, it's something nobody has ever seen before. The monk looked toward the glowing map. Something we've never survived long enough to study. That sentence chilled the room. Liora enlarged the display. The single marker stood motionless in the middle of Elderpine Forest. Dense woods surrounded the area. No villages. No roads. No traveler should have been there. She looked toward Captain Alder. I need eyes on it. He nodded immediately. I'll take a reconnaissance team. No. Everyone turned toward Liora. I'll go. Mrs. Bramble nearly dropped her teacup. Absolutely not. Captain Alder crossed his arms. I agree. You're the last person who should leave the sanctuary. Liora calmly met his gaze. I'm also the only one who remembers how quickly events change. Brother Rowan smiled faintly. She's right. Captain Alder looked annoyed. I dislike it when she's right. So do I. Professor Hazel admitted. But she usually is. Captain Alder sighed dramatically. Fine. But you're not going alone. An hour later, a quiet convoy slipped out of Moonbell's sanctuary to an abandoned railway exit hidden beneath thick ivy. The vehicle barely made a sound. Engineer Finch had redesigned its engine to run almost silently. Captain Alder drove. Liora sat beside him studying old maps. Behind them, Brother Rowan calmly watched the passing forest. Pip had been ordered to remain at the sanctuary. The kitten protested for nearly 15 minutes before Mrs. Bramble distracted them with fresh blueberry muffins. Captain Alder smiled. I've never seen someone surrender to baked goods so quickly. Mrs. Bramble looked offended. My muffins maintain national security. Nobody argued. The deeper they traveled, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb the trees. Liora slowly rolled down her window. The air felt wrong. Not colder, not warmer. Simply heavier. Brother Rowan quietly whispered, "We're close." Captain Alder slowed the vehicle. "I don't like this." Neither did Liora. The forest ahead shimmered strangely, as though the air itself had become glass. Then, they saw it. Hundreds of animals stood perfectly still among the trees. Deer, foxes, rabbits, owls. Every creature faced the same direction. None moved. None blinked. None appeared frightened. They simply watched something hidden deeper inside the forest. Captain Alder reached for his radio. "What in the—" Brother Rowan gently stopped him. "Don't make sudden noises." Captain Alder lowered his voice. "Why?" "They're listening." "To what?" The monk pointed ahead. "That." They left the vehicle behind, walking slowly beneath towering pines. Pastel wildflowers covered the forest floor. Tiny crystal flakes floated lazily through shafts of silver light. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, the trees opened into a vast clearing. Everyone stopped. At its center stood an enormous crystal. Not a shard, not a pillar, a tree. Its transparent branches stretched high above the forest. Its glowing leaves shimmered in pale pinks, soft blues, lavender, and mint green. The crystal flower in Brother Rowan's basket immediately began glowing. Liora had never seen anything so breathtaking, nor so terrifying. Captain Alder whispered, "It wasn't here last week. It wasn't here yesterday." Brother Rowan answered. The crystal tree slowly pulsed. Once, twice, like a heartbeat. Then, someone stepped from behind it. A young cat, tall, elegant, wearing a long cream-colored traveling cloak embroidered with silver thread. Their face was calm, their eyes brilliant gold, not threatening, not welcoming, simply observing. The stranger smiled politely. "I was beginning to wonder when the keeper would arrive." Captain Alder instantly moved in front of Liora. "Identify yourself." The stranger ignored him completely. Instead, they bowed toward Liora. "My name is Saren. I've walked a very long way to meet you." Liora narrowed her eyes. "You know who I am. I know who you became." Captain Alder tightened his grip on the handle of his rescue axe. "Enough riddles. Why are you here?" Saren looked genuinely surprised. "To help." Brother Rowan quietly stepped forward. "I believe them." Captain Alder looked at him in disbelief. "You believe everyone?" "No." The monk smiled. "I've disliked plenty of people." Saren laughed softly. "I've heard stories about you." Brother Rowan sighed. "I was hoping those had disappeared. They've improved with age." For a moment, the tension eased. Only for a moment. Liora studied Saren carefully. "You aren't from Belhaven." "No." "You aren't from this kingdom." "No." "You knew I'd be here." "Yes." "How?" Saren looked up at the crystal tree. "It told me." Captain Alder muttered. "I officially hate talking trees." Without warning, the crystal tree pulsed again. Much brighter this time. Every crystal leaf trembled. The ground vibrated beneath their paws. Brother Rowan's expression changed instantly. "Move!" The roots burst from the earth. Not attacking. Growing. They spread across the clearing like glowing rivers before plunging deep underground. Liora watched the sanctuary map on her wrist communicator. Red lines suddenly appeared beneath Belhaven. Professor Hazel's voice crackled through the speaker. "Liora! Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear." The underground scanners just detected something. "What?" "The crystal roots. They're spreading beneath the city." Engineer Finch interrupted breathlessly. "They're heading straight toward Moonbell's sanctuary." Captain Alder's ears flattened. "Can we stop them?" Professor Hazel hesitated. I don't think they're trying to attack." Liora looked toward the magnificent crystal tree. "Then what are they doing?" Before anyone could answer, the roots reached the sanctuary. The central computer immediately announced. "Unknown crystal network connected. Authentication requested." The command chamber, miles away beneath the manor, fell completely silent. Pip stared at the main display. Mrs. Bramble slowly whispered, "What does authentication mean?" No one answered. Back in the forest, the crystal tree suddenly emitted a soft, melodic chime. Saren smiled. "It recognizes your sanctuary." Liora stared in disbelief. "My sanctuary?" Saren gently shook their head. "No. Our sanctuary." The tree's branches glowed brighter than the sun. Then one enormous crystal blossom slowly opened. Inside rested an ancient silver key unlike anything Liora had ever seen. Saren carefully lifted it, turned toward her, and placed it into her trembling paws. "The first keeper asked us to protect this. We've been waiting nearly 400 years. For you to come and claim it." Liora didn't reach for the key. She simply stared at it. It looked ordinary. Silver. Smooth. Small enough to fit comfortably in one paw. Yet the moment it rested against her fur, the crystal tree behind Saren shimmered. Every branch chimed like delicate glass bells, dancing in a gentle breeze. Captain Alder instinctively stepped closer. "Lady Liora, I'm all right." Except, she wasn't. The instant her paw touched the key, images flooded her mind. Not memories. Not dreams. Places. Hundreds of them. Hidden sanctuaries buried beneath mountains. Ancient libraries beneath deserts. Crystal observatories built into cliffs overlooking forgotten seas. Some abandoned, some still glowing with life, each connected by glowing underground pathways stretching farther than any kingdom's borders. The network wasn't confined to Belhaven. It spanned an entire continent. Then, the visions vanished. Liora staggered backward. Brother Rowan caught her before she fell. Breathe. Captain Alder looked alarmed. What happened? Liora slowly opened her eyes. This sanctuary. She looked toward the crystal tree. Isn't unique. Saren smiled. No. It's simply the youngest. Back beneath Moonbell's sanctuary, the central computer, suddenly awakened systems no one knew existed. Entire walls shifted. Ancient stone doors hidden behind newer construction slowly rolled open. Dust cascaded from ceilings untouched for centuries. Pip nearly dropped a wrench. Whoa! A long-forgotten corridor stretched into darkness. Soft golden lights flickered to life one after another. Mrs. Bramble blinked. I've lived here for 30 years. I didn't know that hallway existed. Neither did anyone else. Engineer Finch quickly grabbed a flashlight. I'm going. Professor Hazel followed immediately. So am I. Captain Alder's deputy tried stopping them. Shouldn't we wait? Finch grinned. If Lady Liora accidentally unlocked a secret underground civilization, I'm absolutely not waiting. The newly revealed hallway curved gently downward. Unlike the rest of the sanctuary, these walls weren't concrete. They were polished white stone streaked with delicate veins of glowing crystal. Pastel murals decorated every surface. Cats from long-forgotten eras planting trees, teaching children, healing the injured, sharing food, building homes. Never armies, never palaces, never thrones, only communities. Professor Hazel stopped before one enormous mural. Her voice became barely audible. They weren't preparing for war. Engineer Finch slowly nodded. They were preparing for kindness. The sentence echoed quietly through the corridor. Neither of them realized how important those words would become. Back in Elder Pine Forest, Captain Alder still hadn't relaxed. I appreciate mysterious gifts as much as the next cat, but I still don't know why you're here. Saren folded their paws behind their back. Fair question. They looked toward Liora. The future has changed. I noticed. In your previous life, there were only crystal storms. Yes. This time, there won't be. Captain Alder frowned. What? Saren looked toward the glowing canopy. The crystal isn't a disaster. Leora's heart skipped. What? It's the warning. Silence. Brother Rowan closed his eyes. I hoped I was wrong. Liora stepped forward. If Ashfall isn't the catastrophe, what is? Saren didn't answer immediately. Instead, they pointed toward the sky. Everyone looked up. High above the shimmering clouds, tiny stars had begun appearing. Except, it wasn't nighttime. Captain Alder narrowed his eyes. Those aren't stars. No. Saren answered softly. They're watching. Liora felt the forest suddenly become colder. Who? Saren finally met her eyes. The harvesters. The name meant nothing. Yet every instinct inside Liora screamed danger. The crystal trees grow because they're trying to protect life. They always have. Captain Alder looked utterly confused. Protect us. From what? Saren quietly answered. Everything that comes after. Far beneath Belhaven, Engineer Finch and Professor Hazel reached the end of the hidden corridor. An enormous circular chamber awaited them. Unlike the sanctuary above, nothing here had decayed. Everything remained pristine. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of ancient journals rested inside crystal cabinets. Mechanical models rotated slowly beneath glass domes. Huge maps covered the walls. One display immediately caught Professor Hazel's attention. It showed Belhaven, not as it looked today, but hundreds of years earlier. Then another map, another era, another city, another kingdom. Again and again, every few centuries, the same crystal patterns appeared. Different names, different rulers, different civilizations. Always the same ending. Engineer Finch whispered. How many times has this happened? Professor Hazel slowly counted the maps. 1, 2, 5, 9, 13, 21, 34. She stopped counting. Because there were far too many. Her voice trembled. Liora thought this was the second time. She looked around the ancient archive. It isn't. It's happened. Dozens of times. A soft mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Welcome. Both cats jumped. Archivists. Engineer Finch looked around wildly. Who's there? A small crystal sphere floated gently into the center of the room. Its warm golden light illuminated smiling carvings surrounding the ceiling. I have waited 392 years for someone to arrive. Professor Hazel stepped closer. You've been alone all this time. I have. Were you waiting for us? No. The sphere glowed brighter. I was waiting. For the keeper. Back at the crystal tree, Leora's communicator suddenly buzzed. Professor Hazel's excited voice filled the speaker. Liora, you need to come back immediately. What happened? We found something impossible. Engineer Finch interrupted. No. We found someone. Liora frowned. Someone. The floating crystal sphere answered through the communicator before Finch could speak. Its calm voice carried across the forest. Keeper, I have fulfilled my instructions. My archives remain intact. My knowledge remains complete. My hope has remained alive. Everyone around Liora froze. Even Saren looked surprised. The archivist still functions? Brother Rowan smiled for the first time in hours. Then perhaps We truly have a chance. Liora tightened her grip on the silver key. She looked once toward Belhaven, then toward the crystal tree, then back at the road leading home. We're leaving. Captain Alder nodded. I'll get the vehicle. Saren stepped aside. I'll meet you there. Brother Rowan raised an eyebrow. You know the way? Saren laughed softly. I know every way. As the group hurried back through the silent forest, none of them noticed the crystal tree's highest branches swaying without any wind. Far above the clouds, one of the tiny lights watching the world slowly moved. Then another. Then dozens. Like curious eyes, turning toward Belhaven. For the first time in centuries, the keepers had begun gathering again. And somewhere beyond the edge of the sky, something ancient finally whispered. They've awakened. And something even older replied. Then begin the harvest. The journey back to Moonbell's sanctuary was silent. Not because there was nothing to say. Because every answer had created 10 new questions. Captain Alder kept one paw firmly on the steering wheel. His sharp amber eyes scanned every bend in the forest road. The animals they had seen earlier were gone. Every deer, every rabbit, every owl, vanished. Only neat rows of paw prints remained in the damp earth. As if they had all walked away together. Brother Rowan quietly noticed them. They'd begun moving. Liora looked outside. Toward Belhaven? No. He frowned. Away from it. Moonbell's sanctuary's enormous entrance slowly opened. The reinforced steel doors separated with a deep rumble. Rows of workers stood waiting. Nobody had been told what happened, but everyone sensed something had changed. Engineer Finch rushed forward before the vehicle had fully stopped. Liora! You have to see it. Professor Hazel followed close behind. The archive. It's alive! Liora hurried after them. The silver key hanging around her neck felt strangely warm. Almost as though it knew where she was going. The hidden corridor looked completely different. The glowing crystal veins had become brighter. Soft golden light flowed through the walls like gentle streams. Pastel murals shimmered with life. Children painted in the artwork now appeared to laugh. Flowers gently swayed. Water rippled inside carved fountains. Captain Alder blinked twice. I'm either exhausted, or those paintings just moved. They did, Brother Rowan answered. They only awaken when a keeper returns. Mrs. Bramble quietly crossed herself. I've officially stopped trying to understand anything. Pip grinned. I started yesterday. The great archive doors slowly opened. The floating crystal sphere waited patiently in the center of the chamber. Its warm light illuminated thousands of shelves stretching farther than anyone expected. Books, maps, mechanical blueprints, botanical samples, crystal fragments, astronomical charts. It wasn't simply a library. It was the memory of entire civilizations. The sphere gently floated toward Liora. Keeper. She stepped closer. I'm here. Authentication required. The silver key immediately floated from around her neck. Without anyone touching it, it drifted through the air. The enormous circular floor began glowing. Ancient symbols appeared beneath everyone's paws. The key gently settled into a small lock carved directly into the stone. Click! Nothing happened. Then, everything happened. The chamber shook. Bookshelves quietly shifted aside. The ceiling slowly opened like the petals of a flower. Far above, a massive crystal lens emerged. Sunlight poured through hidden shafts deep beneath the mountain. Thousands of tiny rainbows danced across the room. The crystal sphere spoke again. Authentication complete. Welcome, Keeper Liora. Every shelf softly chimed. One by one, thousands of books floated from their places. They circled peacefully around the chamber like colorful birds. Pip's jaw dropped. I don't even know where to start reading. Engineer Finch laughed. I don't think anyone does. Professor Hazel suddenly noticed something unusual. Wait! She hurried toward one shelf. Every book carried a year. Not titles. Years. Some are recent. Some ancient. One shelf stopped her completely. Its oldest book was labeled Cycle 1. Beside it, Cycle 2. Cycle 3. Cycle 4. The numbering continued. Dozens. Hundreds. Finally, Cycle 391. Professor Hazel slowly looked toward the floating sphere. Every cycle is one ash fall. The sphere glowed warmly. Correct. Silence spread through the archive. Pip quietly counted under their breath. 391. Captain Alder leaned against a nearby table. So we've never defeated it. The sphere answered calmly. Incorrect. Everyone looked up. Brother Rowan frowned. What? There have been successful cycles. Leora's heart skipped. You mean, someone survived? More than survived. The sphere projected glowing images into the air. Entire cities hidden beneath crystal forests. Children playing beneath enormous glass trees. Markets. Schools. Music. Gardens. Communities thriving. Not hiding. Living. Liora stared in disbelief. They built a future. They did. What happened to them? The sphere dimmed slightly. They left. Left. The world. Nobody spoke. Even Professor Hazel had no theory for that. Suddenly, the sanctuary's emergency alarm blared. Not amber. Not red. Crimson. The lights flashed urgently. Every worker stopped what they were doing. Captain Alder instinctively reached for his communicator. Report. A panicked voice answered. Captain, the Eastern Observation Tower. We're seeing movement. How many? The guard hesitated. I can't count them. Seconds later, everyone crowded into the sanctuary's observation room. A giant crystal telescope rotated toward the eastern hills. Liora looked through it first. Her breathing stopped. Thousands. No. Tens of thousands. Citizens from Belhaven, walking calmly toward the mountains. No shouting. No panic. No luggage. No conversation. Just walking. Slowly. Together. As though answering a silent invitation. Mrs. Bramble whispered. Why are they leaving? Professor Hazel adjusted another telescope. They're not choosing the same roads. They're all taking the shortest route. Toward the crystal tree. Captain Alder frowned. They look. He struggled to find the words. Peaceful. Brother Rowan looked deeply troubled. They've heard the song. Liora looked at him. What song? The one we cannot hear. Without warning, Pip suddenly covered both ears. Ouch. Everyone turned. The little kitten's face had become pale. It stopped. What stopped? The music. Silence. Pip looked around nervously. You really can't hear it? Nobody answered. The kitten slowly nodded toward the distant hills. It started this morning. I thought everyone could hear it. A really pretty song. It made me feel. Pip searched for the words. Like I wanted to go somewhere. Brother Rowan's expression changed instantly. He knelt beside the kitten. Can you still hear it now? Pip shook their head. No. It disappeared when we entered the archive. The monk looked toward Liora. The sanctuary blocked it. Liora immediately understood. The crystal network. He nodded. It's protecting us. Engineer Finch quietly swallowed. If Pip heard it, how many other children can? Nobody answered. They didn't have to. Far beyond the sanctuary, long lines of silent citizens continued walking through fields of pastel flowers. Toward the crystal tree. Toward whatever waited beyond it. Then the telescope zoomed automatically. One tiny figure stepped out of the marching crowd. A little kitten. No older than 5. She stopped. Turned around. Looked directly toward Moonbell Sanctuary. Then, she smiled. Raised one tiny paw. And whispered something the telescope couldn't hear. At that exact moment, every crystal inside the archive dimmed. The floating sphere spoke for the first time with unmistakable urgency. Keeper, the harvest has begun. And this cycle is progressing faster than any before. Nobody moved. The words echoed through the observation room. The harvest has begun. Liora slowly turned toward the floating crystal sphere. What exactly is being harvested? For the first time since awakening. The archivist hesitated. Its warm golden glow dimmed. When a civilization reaches sufficient growth, it attracts attention. Captain Alder frowned. Attention from who? The sphere answered with chilling calm. The ones who measure worlds. Engineer Finch rubbed his forehead. I'm an engineer. I need answers with fewer riddles. The sphere brightened slightly. Then I shall answer as an engineer. It projected a glowing model of the planet into the air. Thousands of tiny lights represented cities. Every few centuries, one light began shining much brighter than the others. When intelligence, creativity, and cooperation reach a critical threshold, a civilization begins producing extraordinary energy. Professor Hazel whispered. Knowledge. Hope. Innovation. The sphere nodded. Correct. The harvesters do not seek land. They do not seek treasure. They seek potential. Silence. Pip quietly looked up. They're stealing people? The sphere answered softly. Yes. Another image appeared. A thriving city. Laughing families. Schools. Gardens. Without warning, a beam of pale silver light descended from the sky. Entire neighborhoods vanished. No explosions. No fire. Simply gone. The remaining survivors fled underground. Captain Alder clenched his jaw. So Ashfall hides us. Brother Rowan nodded. The crystal forests scatter their sensors. The storms interfere with whatever technology they use. Engineer Finch slowly looked toward the crystal tree visible through the telescope. So the crystal has been protecting us all along. Yes. Saren's voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Nobody had heard them enter. They smiled apologetically. I dislike dramatic entrances, but doors keep opening before I reach them. Pip grinned. You're weird. Saren laughed. I've been called worse. Liora folded her arms. If the crystal protects us, why are citizens walking toward it? Saren became serious. Because the harvesters learned. Learned what? That they cannot always find hidden civilizations. So, they developed another method. The observation room fell silent. They invite them. Mrs. Bramble frowned. Invite. The song. Brother Rowan answered quietly. It isn't mind control. It magnifies longing, loneliness, regret, curiosity, hope, every emotion someone carried quietly inside themselves. The stronger the feeling, the louder the song becomes. Liora immediately thought about the smiling citizens walking peacefully toward the crystal tree. They weren't prisoners. They believed they were finally going somewhere wonderful. That realization frightened her even more. Captain Alder immediately reached for his communicator. Seal every sanctuary entrance. Nobody leaves without authorization. Static answered. Then, Captain, we have a problem. What now? Some workers are requesting permission to visit family. Captain Alder looked confused. Now, they say. The guard hesitated. They suddenly missed them. Brother Rowan quietly closed his eyes. It's spreading. Liora hurried into the central plaza of Moonbell Sanctuary. Hundreds of workers stood gathered. Nobody argued. Nobody panicked. They simply looked. Distracted. One young carpenter stepped forward. My wife lives in Belhaven. Feel like I should see her. Another worker nodded. My parents too. I don't know why. I just know I have to go. Mrs. Bramble whispered. They don't even realize. No. Brother Rowan answered. They believe the feelings are their own. Liora climbed onto the central staircase, overlooking the plaza. Everyone looked toward her. She could lie. She could order them to stay. Neither would work. Instead, she spoke from the heart. I know some of you feel something strange. Heads nodded throughout the crowd. I won't tell you your feelings aren't real. They are. I felt them too. Complete silence. But ask yourselves one question. She paused. If that feeling disappears tomorrow, will you regret leaving today? The workers looked at one another. Uncertainty slowly replaced urgency. Liora continued. If you still want to leave tomorrow, I'll personally open the gates. But today, I ask for one night. Just one. Sleep. Eat. Talk with the people beside you. If the feeling remains, we'll decide together. An elderly mason slowly lowered the travel bag he'd packed. One night. He repeated. Others followed. Captain Alder quietly smiled. You didn't command them. No. Liora answered. They deserve a choice. Brother Rowan looked genuinely impressed. The first keeper would have approved. Late that evening, most of the sanctuary had gone to bed. Liora couldn't sleep. She wandered alone through the underground gardens. Soft artificial stars twinkled across the ceiling. Tiny streams reflected pastel lantern light. The peaceful atmosphere almost convinced her the world was still normal. Almost. A tiny chirping sound interrupted her thoughts. She looked down. Pip's little mechanical bird landed gently on her shoulder. A folded note was tucked beneath one wing. She unfolded it. It contained only 3 words. Come quickly. Pip. She found the kitten inside the engineering workshop. Half the lights were off. Dozens of strange inventions covered every table. Mechanical butterflies, water filters, clockwork toys, portable lanterns. Pip stood in front of an enormous blueprint. I think, the kitten said nervously. I accidentally found something. Engineer Finch looked completely stunned. I checked the math 6 times. It works. Liora approached the blueprint. Her eyes widened. It showed an enormous network of mirrors, crystal lenses, signal towers. Professor Hazel arrived moments later. What happened? Engineer Finch pointed toward the plans. Pip figured out how to block the song. Silence. Professor Hazel adjusted her glasses. What? Pip scratched behind one ear. I wasn't trying to. I just wondered what would happen if sound bounced off crystal the same way light does. Engineer Finch laughed in disbelief. I've spent 20 years designing communication systems. This child solved it while eating strawberry biscuits. Pip looked embarrassed. The biscuits helped. Even Liora laughed. For the first time in days, it felt genuine. She knelt beside the little inventor. Can we build it? Engineer Finch looked at the calculations again. If we have enough crystal. Yes. Captain Alder entered the workshop, just in time to hear the last sentence. How long? Engineer Finch smiled. If everyone helps. 3 days. Liora immediately stood. Then that's our next mission. No more hiding. No more simply surviving. For the first time, they had discovered something that could fight back. Far above the sanctuary, the stars continued multiplying across the daytime sky. One by one. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They no longer looked distant. They looked closer, as though the heavens themselves were quietly descending toward Belhaven. And somewhere beyond those silver lights, an ancient voice echoed through endless darkness. The keepers have remembered. Another answered. Then let them remember. It changes nothing. But for the very first time in nearly 400 cycles, that voice sounded uncertain,